Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, and take a look at this cream puff. So this is a 2007 Ford F150 with the 5.4 liter Triton 3-valve motor in it. And for those of you who aren't aware of those motors, that little bit of information will become real important in a little bit. But first, let's take a look at this thing and talk about where it came from, why it's here. So this purchase is a purchase of my son, my youngest, Marc. He had a mishap with his car, and it ended up being, because it was an older Hyundai, we didn't carry collision on it, it was totaled. Long story short, he's now driving my car to get to work after school. So we got to get him a vehicle. Well, we've been looking for something reasonable. In the meantime, a friend of his who was getting ready to get his license was told by his dad that if he was able to get this truck running, that he could, I guess, use it. So what ended up happening was my son went over there and tried to help him get it running. And so the story goes that the father was driving this truck and using it, but it was using too much gas. Very poor gas mileage, just V8. So he ended up getting a Toyota Camry, much newer. And this ended up just getting parked on a grassy area near the house where they live. And I guess it was sitting there for about a year. During that short time that it was off the road, not being used, and being parked in that grassy area, apparently rust really kicked in on this thing big time. And one of the first things they found when they went to tow this thing up onto the driveway was that the wheels were locked up. Both rear wheels didn't want to move. So my son took the driver's side wheel off, took the caliper off, removed the brake shoes, and was able to get that wheel to turn, but the other wheel wouldn't turn. Also, the battery was completely dead. And they tried, I guess, charging the battery using a jump pack, and they just couldn't get it to start. It wouldn't crank. Then, I guess they put a new battery in it, and it still wouldn't crank. And at that point, they gave up on it. So the truck sat there for a while longer, and my son's friend mentioned that they got to get rid of the truck. They're probably going to end up just having the junkyard take it. And I said, well, hold on, let's go take a look at this truck. Maybe it's something we could put some money into and fix up cheap. So I went out there, looked at the truck, and I saw what you're seeing right now, which is, at first glance, the body actually looks really good. You know, it doesn't look like it's completely rotted out. Okay, looks can be deceiving. It's a step side bed, which is kind of neat. If we get closer, you can see, yes, we do have quite a bit of rust in those rocker panels underneath there. Okay. And the frame. So there are sections of the frame where I went back with a hammer to do some further inspection, because I saw a lot of rust flakes on the driveway where they had dragged the truck onto, and determined that, yeah, the frame's got some spots where I was able to bang right through with the hammer in the bottom, but the side of the frame still seems fairly strong. I think we'll be able to weld some patches into the frame. The passenger side seems a lot more solid for whatever reason. And also, the floor underneath here, so I don't know if this is going to show up, but that's where a lot of the rust was falling off from. That's actually the floor we're looking at. I was able to poke through that to the point where I could push on the carpet. So that's really bad. Floor on this side's rotted out. Passenger side's pretty good.
And from far away, the body looks good, but if you get up close, you can see things like this, where this is all bubbling right here. So this truck is going to start to rot. But I think the truck only has like 122,000 miles on it. So that's not bad. But what I didn't know about this truck until after my son had agreed to buy it, and I told him, yeah, if you want to spend the money and take a chance, go ahead and buy it, was that this truck's motor, the F150 F.4 liter Triton, which in the 2007 years was the 3-valve version of this motor, is considered by many to be one of the worst V8s that Ford ever made. And it is plagued with several issues. This whole truck actually has a couple different issues that tend to happen with it. But the big issue is that things can go wrong in the motor that can basically turn the motor into complete junk. And then you're looking at a repower. If you get a remanufactured motor, it's been remanufactured with better parts, which is an improvement. And then there's even some debate there as to whether or not that still makes the truck, it makes it better than it was, but how long will it last after a new motor's put in it? Not to mention the fact that a new motor installed is going to run you somewhere around $4,000 to $6,000 in this area, parts and labor. And the truck's just not worth it. The truck's got a book value of around $7,500 in good condition. So it's just not worth it. So right now, because we couldn't turn this motor over, we have no idea if this motor is bad. Now, what it's got going for is it's only 122,000 miles on it. The oil looks very clean. So at least recently somebody did an oil change on it. The hope being that whoever owned this truck was pretty meticulous about the service intervals and getting the oil changed, because that's very important on these trucks. Getting the oil changed, because there are passages in the block that sludge will build up in and cause oil starvation to some of the key valve train components and other things that can cause just big problems. One of the other problems that's easy to check on these trucks is there's a thrust bearing inside there for the crankshaft that can get torn up, and once that gets torn up, that will cause excessive crankshaft end play. So if we're looking at the motor in here this way, we're talking about the crankshaft is in here like this. End play is the amount it can move back and forth like this. If you get excessive end play, it can literally, the counterweights on the crankshaft can start rubbing against the bearing caps and stuff. But more importantly, what ends up happening is it starts to shred the rear main seal on these trucks. And then they get oil leaks, which is why a lot of people have reported having to get rear main seals replaced on these trucks to fix oil leaks. The problem is, if the mechanic doesn't realize it's because of end play, you put the main seal in and the problem's just going to come back, because the problem is that you've got this crankshaft going back and forth. And that's a complete engine motor. That's a complete rebuild on the engine to fix that. So again, you're back to, might as well put in a newer, better engine. But there is zero evidence of any oil leaking here in the area where you would expect to see oil if this had a bad rear main seal. The guy that my son's friend's family bought the truck from reported that this had a transmission done on it at some point. So it could be that maybe the new main seal was put in then. But I also checked and I looked at the space between the back of the harmonic balancer and the front of the timing cover, and it's barely any space there, which is exactly how that should look. So I'm with the lower mileage on it and the fact that that space isn't really big, I'm banking on that this does not have a failed thrust washer for the crankshaft, that it does not have excessive crankshaft end play. So that kind of rules that problem out. As far as other things go with the valve, the phasers, the cam phasers, the tensioner, all of that baloney, we won't know until we get the motor running, if we can get the motor running. So my suspicion is that the starter is seized, because all this corrosion probably got to that, and maybe the solenoid is stuck or whatever, because I ended up trying to jump it with a jump pack. When I put my jump pack on the battery that was in here, my jump pack actually gave off an audible tone to indicate that that battery was so far dead that there was no way it was going to do anything. So I disconnected the battery leads completely and then just hooked the jump pack directly to the battery leads so that the dead battery would no longer be loading down the jump pack. That allowed me to turn the key on so I could verify what the mileage was on the truck. And also, just for the heck of it, I turned the key and I heard a very audible click that would indicate to me that, yeah, it tried, the solenoid tried to close, but no joy, no rotation in the motor. So what I've got in there right now is one of the two batteries out of the Dodge Ram is in there now. And the battery that was in this truck is actually in the Ram, and I'm hoping it's going to get charged back up by driving the Ram around. So I've got a battery in there right now that should have enough juice that if the starter, wants to break free, it could. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to hook the battery up. I'm going to try and crank it. I doubt it's going to work. But then I'm going to go on underneath there with a hammer, and I'm going to wrap on the solenoid and the starter housing and see if we can't break anything free. All right, hook the battery back up. Door's ajar. All right, let's try and crank it. Nothing. All right, I just banged on the starter solenoid. Let's see what happens. Ooh, a little bit more of a click. Still not going to start though. I think we should pull that starter.